You're ready.
Okay, hello everyone, I'm Serena. Today I will be responding to Kyle Johnson's speech. His main claim is California high-speed train project is not practical to achieve long-term goals in our current economic state. His supporting claims are: 1, the high-speed rail project will allow for eminent domain to occur. 2, the high-speed rail project is not the most efficient or most effective way to travel. And 3, the high-speed rail project will put California into even more financial crisis. So first off, Kyle talks about eminent domain, and he mainly talks that what it is, the government can take your property, but it has to be for public use, and they have to provide you with proper compensation. But the way that he discusses eminent domain, he mainly focuses on the negatives rather than the positives that can actually occur. So eminent domain, when it takes place, it goes through a process in which the government can't just take your property from you right away. They have to make an offer to you, and you have to accept it. And if you don't accept it, that's when you go through a process and you can go to court. But even in the end, you'll still be provided with an amount of money, and the government can still take your land. However, the price that they place on your property is typically increased, so the owner is able to actually make a profit off of their land, more than what they would actually get if they just sold it. And even then, they don't just kick you off. He gives an example of a Solet family. He says that they're unhappy with the portion that they received from the government and that they were forced to leave, but they weren't forced to leave in general. They were just forced to give up a part of their property, whereas eminent domain is more difficult in cities where the property is smaller for residents, whereas in farmlands you have a larger portion of land they can take, but even then you're compensated for it. So the second point I would like to address is he talks about that the project isn't the most efficient or most effective way to travel. Whereas as of now, it may not be the most efficient or effective, because he mentions a plane. Why take a train when you can take a plane that is an hour faster? But this project is supposed to be done in 2028, so about 12 years from now. And so in 12 years, according to the crude oil long-term forecast, oil will have doubled today's prices. So today, a barrel of oil is $43, whereas by 2025, it will be $82.6. So it may not be as efficient or effective in the current day, but in 12 years, the price for a ticket will probably have increased as much as the oil. The projected fares for the train is also $85, $105, and $86 according to Kyle. So if those prices remain the same right now as they do, if they remain the same in 2028, I think that's pretty efficient. It's pretty effective, and compared to flying with pollution, the high-speed rail also, according to their diagrams and their analysis of how it's built, it also runs off of like energy, so it saves energy, so it's not, it doesn't really contribute to pollution, so it's also effective. The last point I would like to address is his claim that the project will put California into an even more financial crisis. The project essentially will create, according to the economic analysis on HRS, there will be a creation of 500,000 jobs. And there will also be, within just phase 1 of the building, there will be 1,246,000 work hours created. So that's not going to further the economic crisis. It actually will help the economy, and it will help the people who live in the area. So the use of cap and trade is also going to, he mentions it in his evidence, but the use of cap and trade doesn't necessarily worsen the crisis. It can actually help it, because it can help the government provide funds through profits of selling a bond. So it will make funds for the government, and cap and trade has to deal with what is allowed for pollution in the area, and that also is helpful when it comes to the environment. So it also connects back to being efficient in general. So eminent domain, it can occur, but it's not as negative as it makes it sound. It's only worse for cities because in smaller areas. The project will be more effective and efficient in 12 years. That's when oil and prices increase, as well as plane tickets. He also mentioned that if you plan ahead, you can save money, but sometimes people don't plan ahead. They need to catch a flight the next day, and the prices are way more expensive. So why would you pay more in money when you can use an extra hour and save yourself some money as well? And also, lastly, the crisis will not be worsened due to the project. The government funds about $3.3 billion according to the process timeline. And so it's not really going to worsen the crisis at all. But instead, it'll help the people with job hours and jobs in general.
All right, the main points identified, you lay out the secondary claims, you signpost the first point on eminent domain. You don't really dispute the argument that eminent domain is going to be utilized, but you say, well, there are good things and bad things about it, which is not really a surprise because the advocates talk about what the bad things about it are. So I'm not exactly sure that your answer is really to the point here. That you then describe what eminent domain would do generally and how people would be compensated, but I don't know that that answers necessarily all of the criticisms that the advocate was talking about, although I can't remember some of the specifics. You only mentioned the one example, and your basically justification is, look, if they have a large amount of area and they only take part of it, it's not that big a deal. And it seemed to me like there was another issue, like, for example, if it goes through the center of the area, it creates a huge division and additional cost for the families, and it breaks up the cities and that sort of thing. So I think that there needed to be a little bit more argument on that point. On the effectiveness issue, you project what the cost is going to be of oil. I don't know how recent that projection is, but I suspect that they may have been adjusted a little bit since oil prices have dropped recently in terms of the per barrel costs. Long-term projections are probably pretty reasonable, $82 a barrel. That doesn't sound like it's out of line 12 years from now, but what you don't do is you don't translate that into a cost issue that we can then compare to the cost of the ticket that you're discussing. And it's also not clear why the cost of a ticket on the train wouldn't increase unless you were suggesting that the energy that is used by the train will not be based on fossil fuels like oil. So I'm not sure what the basis of your argument there is. On the financial issue, you mostly talk about some financial pluses, so you've got some rebuttal arguments here that deal with extra advantages of having the high-speed rail because it creates jobs in building the rail system. But of course, it does cost a lot of money to put it into place, and that seems to be the argument that the advocate's talking about, that the state really can't afford it. And you come back at the end by talking about some very slight amount of money. I shouldn't say $4 billion. Doesn't sound slight to me. I'd be happy to have it. But it's, I don't know how much it's going to be in regard to the project. It seems to me that the advocate mentioned a substantially higher cost for the project, and that the $4.8 billion that you talk about sounds like it would be pretty minimal in comparison. All right, thank you.